So hi everyone, and welcome to the Provocations, Conversations, Iterations series. This is part of the ongoing Provocations Project, facilitated by Jessica Rajko, John MacCallum, and myself, Teoma Naccarato. So the premise is that we put out an open call for provocations on the question of what aspects of your practice and research are invisible to your collaborators. And we've been collecting provocations initially in 2019. So some of the people here with us today submitted back then, and again, presently this year. And we want to bring provocateurs, those who have submitted provocations, together to revisit past provocations, present new ones, but most importantly, to explore their provocations in relation to one another, to read them through one another. So we are thrilled to have here with us today, Johannes Birringer, Francisca Morand, Javier, and Zelia ZZ Tan. We are going to begin with a collaborative provocation from Francisca Morand and Javier.
Great. Thank you, Teoma. Thanks for inviting us. We're happy to be here again. And I'll start by reading our provocation that we wrote with Francisca. And it goes like this. It says, how do we identify moments when the interactive dialogue between movement and sound in our work is innovative for both of us and both of our disciplines? How does time unfold for each collaborator at moments when the modes, the ways of production are separated within the same collaborative process? Francisca coming from dance and choreography, myself coming from sound art and music. What are the new words that have emerged during our process of collaboration? How are the body gestures that appear when we need to explain to the other something that is very characteristic of each person's discipline? So there's a lot of conversations that involve the emergence of vocabulary and what are the words that come up the most in this interdisciplinary collaboration. Do you think that you have ever used a metaphor as a device to bridge or to encounter between movement, sound, and technology? And that's our provocation, and I guess I have to pass it on to Celia.
Hello, I'm Zelia. I respond to the question with two directions. One is challenge, one is approach. The challenge emphasizes on the practical workflow and the way of sensing. So as a dance maker, I'm striving to practice my aesthetic concept of the bodies in virtual reality and the performance of my avatar in different software made collaborators. For example, technicians, other virtual dancers could constantly interpret my mocap practice. This situation was specifically located in the AR post-production workflow. My artistic choice may be hidden in the data structure. They are not only technical glitches, but also the bias of analyze are implicated in the movements. To confront the challenge, I assume collaborators need new awareness to create better interactions. So I will share a video where I'm talking about my approaches, creating a new form of sensing to meet the challenge. First, I initiate experiment about the virtual bodies. Second, I apply technology and the somatic principles to further explore my research interest. What happens when the physical bodies are transforming into digital space and time? Third, the choreography task helped me to make an impact in a data application. I'm curious if invisible work is relatively personal content. How can a group of researchers explore their senses? That's the AR dance performance, and it's happening in German. And pass to Johannes.
Yeah, thank you. I was told by our facilitators that I had 2 provocations in the moment still published. And I wonder now whether I should look at the new one, but keep the old one in the background. And so let me just bring up an image and see whether this might help. I had an image in the older provocation that shows my collaborator friends and myself on a weekend workshop foraging in the forest in my village in Germany. And then we spent the next few days looking at film footage, writing, we did some painting, and we also worked on a performance. But 2 years ago, I thought about foraging in the forest as an environmental idea. So my metaphor would be the interactors and their environment, and what can be seen, what can be heard or sensed or not seen, what is perhaps a bit more unknown or invisible. And now 2 years later, I think I'm fully dedicated to this exploration of composting, compost, and in a way playing with the word composition and decomposition. So looking at actually the things that we produce and that we don't know how they will develop as remains, and then investigating what it is that I'm learning in the process of what I don't know. And compost or biological processes, micro processes are often difficult to decipher and maybe are less visible. And that also includes human relations. And perhaps in our discussions, I would love to ask the others about whether you primarily focus on human and technical relations among interaction, or whether you also include the environment, nature, biological processes, and environmental processes. So that would be my question to begin with.
Beautiful, thank you, all of you. And this is now the moment that we can go into questions and discussion. So that's a perfect lead in.
And if I may be so bold and follow up my question to Francisca and Javier, would be, because you are working maybe in a sense as a couple, dancer, choreographer, and sound artist. And I just watched a performance a few days ago at a platform in Berlin where a dancer was performing what looked to me like very slow, almost internally focused, meditative movement. Her name is Jeanette Ginslow. Her partner, a sound designer and programmer, had created a software for a heart rate measuring device. And so that one was creating sound, yeah, the device. And then I wondered, is the dancer listening to the sound that her heart creates? Does it matter? And what is it for the sound artist that is interesting about the heart of the movement? So I wonder, in your collaboration, what do you realize and what do you not see or hear?
So maybe I can expand or try to respond to the first question, and maybe you can go with the second one, Francisca, as your experience with the those kind of performances. So we were just talking about what's our role within a larger part of society, and how do we get affected or try not to get affected also by the external changes. And as a little bit of context, even before the pandemic, we were having a lot of social unrest in Chile, which ultimately meant that we have to delay our exhibition of one of our latest pieces. And we were already trying to figure out, okay, so we wanted to show our piece, but then again the museum closed because we were having all these problems in Chile in general, and then the pandemic came, and we had another further delay, and we were saying, okay, so we were trying to create a piece that talks about like flexibility, that talks about like all the different spaces that come in between entities, people, objects, and how are we reacting, or how are we adapting also to that environment. So it's very so that touches a fiber in terms of also always I don't know, being alert or trying to be constantly affected, and I think, at least for me personally, it also built up a new way of confronting artistic processes that are maybe I was before a little bit too self-concerned in terms of our specific work, and also not looking to the outside. That's at least one way of looking at it. Besides the environment, or trying to interpret the environment as everything that happens outside the collaboration and outside the artistic work.
Yeah, and even I think environment, we are inside the environment. It's like it's not surrounding us, and then even though that sometimes we feel that we are thinking or working in other directions, we are ultimately we are inside this. In the case of Chile, this social uprising, all this social movement that was really, well, I know in Hong Kong was in the same time, it was shifting all our environment, not only the ecology, like the nature, but our social, our human relationships. And that really has impact, how Javier says, our way of thinking the work. And about your other question, Johannes, as a dancer, I'm trained to listen music in a certain way. And with the technology I have been learning or developing with Javier, I feel that I have to listen with all my body. It's like I listen through touch, through feeling how vibration makes me move, and also I listen through movement. Like it's like I'm the movement is the way I'm listening, and it's the way I can understand how I'm listening, what I'm listening. It really materializes in movement through many senses at the same time. Is a very, that's why I really enjoy it, because it's like a full experience.
I mean, if I may follow up and then include Celia, of course. Celia, you showed us a clip where you're working with an avatar and you have a relationship that's also sensory, but you mentioned the underlying, maybe the data environment that's in the interactivity. But Francisca, in your provocation, there's no mentioning of Chile and the social environment, Javier.
No.
But you're talking about what is the new gesture or the new word that might emerge in the collaboration. So can you give us an example of a new gesture that comes from hearing the avataric sound? Because the sound is in a way coming from the outside into your ears and body. So it's like an avatar, the sound, right?
Yeah, I think the again, maybe Francisca is.
I thought that Celia was going to.
It's okay.
You were muted, sorry.
Well, I still don't know whether you really addressed the gesture and the word, Francisca.
Ah, the gesture and the word. Let me think.
Maybe I answer first. So actually the sound produced through the avatar is come from my body weight with like steps. So the steps recording. So I emphasize the sound. Extra part I muted or use the air conditioning sound track under the line. So you still listen some sound a little bit, but just the last part with my movement and avatar dance together, I emphasize the weight because I found like the normal studio is not good for mocap recording because the wood is influence my mocap data. The flow is being distracted. So all the light is yellow, it's not green. So I come from this point to improve my performance and I can set better movement combination to someone. It can be 3 minutes long and I can still running on spot with the step, but the weight is changing because heavy or like the durational parts. I think it's, and also beside that, I found it interesting when I play with the sound of the controller. When I drawing, it creates a sound like the light, and it's synchronized with my movement. It creates me like satisfaction, not only through the visual part. It's like really like body drawing in a 4D space, or if I want, because I make the floor in different layers, so I can jumping, yes, in my headset with.
So you seem to have a visual model in your mind also of high and low and pitch. And when I read your provocation and you mentioned the glitch, I was interested in whether you think the glitch is something that's not so visible because it occurs unexpectedly. And perhaps, Francisca, this question of, do you know the sound that you're hearing from Javier, or is it something that always surprises you? Like the air conditioning, I know what air conditioning sounds like, but maybe it makes some hissing or clicking noises and you become interested, in where it comes from, Zelia.
The air conditioning actually is every studio have the air conditioning to make the air a little bit more clean, especially in the coronavirus period. And also in Hong Kong, like the air conditioning is so cold. Like if you enjoy the summer, you may feel like so contrast. So I think the movement also create a different energy, and especially when I doing the mocap in summertime, it's so hot, so sweating. And it also created another dynamic for me to sense how I move, where is sweating, where is too warm for me, or the battery on my back is too hot sometimes. So how can I like find the
but see, this issue of the heat or the coldness was not coming through from the video, but you are addressing it when you ask for better sensory translation, right?
Yes.
You're interested in the...
You talk about the translation, but I have a question about translating, because I think there's bias inside of the translating, and also
in your software, but or in your mind.
Software. Sorry. Yeah. But for translating, I have some questions, because I think there's some prediction before, like you pretend someone reads the lines, then can be understand, especially like some language are not the dominant one, or there's some diversity, like the sound, it can be created in different layers or can be understood in other ways. So the translating often talk in dance context, but I think it can be expanded like for a better sense. And when you say about the antonomous, about like because some translator can automatically translate your language, but actually it don't have the will or the passion. Like when I feel the heat, it can be a passion or like the heartbeat.
Yeah.
It's excitement or emotion. And I think that can come back to the Francisca's like gesture or the body, how you feel the sensory body, or like more cultural perspective, or a bio field. I don't know.
Now we have to ask Javier. Javier, is your software biased? Does it have a
Of course. Of course. Biased and politically biased.
Politically incorrect. Going back to the gesture and sound, in this moment, we are trying to one day open this last work, and I'm working with voice and sensors that work with, can you, Javier, say it in English?
So yeah, we're as different from Celia. We're not using motion capture. We're using on-body sensors, the Mayo sensors, and the material for all the sound composition is Francisca's own voice. So she has a microphone and she modulates her own voice as she performs.
Yeah, but the many of the mappings have to do a lot with time. Like my voice goes, like I record and my voice is there, but it's always going. And the gestures I do to change the sound have to do with stopping and stretching the sound. And it's a very, I was trying to think about the performance you said, Johannes, like very quiet and calm, feeling the heart. This is the opposite. It's like the sound is running and I have to catch it, catch it and stretch it, catch it and stretch it, catch it and really find in that moment the sound and respond to that sound that if not is going away. Then it's an opposite sensation that makes me think about stretching, about coming back, because I can stretch it and in some moment that it also goes backwards. Then I can really catch a moment of my own voice that already happened. And it's
if I can use a counter idea at this moment, both addressing Zelia and you both, from my last workshop here in Germany, I began to think, okay, this controlling and stretching or this manipulating that we are so used to in interactive work, perhaps, has to do somehow with agency. And when you are now thinking of compost, I show a couple of slides. We ended the Sunday with some long stretched canvases in my garden, and I asked everyone to draw with their bodies on it. And this was before the rain and the wind came. So on the next day, I left everything lying there. Everything is still in my garden. The painted canvases and some of the compost heaps began to do things to it that I could not foresee, because what's happening now in the garden is happening depending on the wind, the rain and the sun, So these things are now beginning to deteriorate. And I think giving up control of the interaction with materials, environments, and my partners was very a relief for me. I don't need to know who's in control. And maybe that has something to do with the invisibility, that we can trust. We can trust the avatars. Celia, the air conditioning. The air conditioning is part of our environment. You're right.
And that also start to drawing my environment that I want to like create, like the infrastructure that I want to create with my partner. It's not about the theater, how it's built, not about the lighting, how it's on spot. It can be functioning in many different ways, and it's all about communication or the trust and the like you say, the accurate knowledge. I think it's like, for example, the workflow is like a game designing, like agency is like an agile process, is spinning, like everyone trying to catch something, but actually you are on the road or in a circling, like everyone trying to negotiate, but I don't know like who is addressing the negotiate in which sense. So there's also many discussion can be happening or can be played in body, like bodies in different layers, virtual one, physical one, sensory one, or philosophical one.
Yeah. No, very true. So maybe at this point we need to ask our guests, our hosts, to come in. Yeah, Teoma.
Yes, thank you. We, as promised, we've held back because we love hearing from all of you. And I think part of what's really striking to me is the scope or the range of the discussion, from ecological to economic to artistic to, well, I'm going to get in trouble by making a list of categories, but many different sort of directions to enter into this work from your practices and broader thinking. One thing that has stuck with me also is this notion of a metaphor brought forth in Fran and Javier's provocation. And I wonder, Johannes, the notion of compost or composting in relation to decomposition, composition, recomposition that you brought forth. I'm curious, do you see this as a metaphor? Do you see this, how do you describe this sort of practice and how it relates to your long history and body of work in relation to digital performance? Yeah.
See, and maybe addressing myself to my artistic colleagues, I don't know, Francisca and Javier or Zelia, whether you're reading Donna Haraway where you live, but my team here in Europe, we were reading this bioscientist's book in the German translation, Staying with the Trouble. And in her last chapter, she looks forward into a possible future of interaction between other species, between also humans and non-humans and insects and butterflies and so on. And this is, as I'm getting old and slow, a dream that I think is a wonderful dream because it has to do with the environment and the climate. And so for me, composition is a metaphor, like Francisca, that's a gesture. I don't want to make another dance piece on the stage. I want to work at the moment learning how to compost. In actually compost, in terms of the way in Germany we separate out our trash, the plastic, the paper, the glass, the organic materials. And I know people in Brazil are looking at it because it's not government sort of regulated what happens with the leftovers. And I think that's, again, something for us to look at.
It's beautiful what you say about compost. I have, even though I live in an apartment, I don't have garden, but I have compost. And I have compost with worms. I love them. And the decomposition is very nice because it's like you have all these complex, like all the colors of the rest of the food, like seeds, and then finally it turns black and very
oil.
And comes very simple, like very unified, and to feel that decomp and comp position, I tend in composition to come to some unity in some sense, but at the same time with a lot of difference. And here it comes to a unity where the complex is made simple. It's a nice metaphor.
But it's not a concluding unity, but it seems to be like a microbial process where you can still see the worms and the insects crawling, and maybe we can associate with that feeling on our skin. And in terms of, like Zelia, if you work with the avatar and we have these strange sounds, they go under the skin, right? those sounds.
Yes, like a vibration, little bit. But actually, when I respond to Francisca, the metaphor, I think it's like water for me, like the relationship between technology and the dance, because it shapes and formulates in different metaphors. And I think in the approaches I mentioned as a choreographic approach, actually, I want to break down to three. Like, for example, one is to compose real human behavior and the displacement, because when I talk about somatic practice, it's focused on the body-mind centering, but I think it challenges a way to really behave in the daily life, and also changes my way to focus. And like, for example, the water, like it's constantly dynamic, and due to the different levels of affection, it also changes our perceptions. So
I think this is a really beautiful range of metaphors to leave with. There's so much more. I feel like it's, spilling, overflowing, and we should definitely continue this conversation. We can do so to some extent through Discord, and we'll be in touch. But I'm really struck also by the situatedness of each of your responses and changes in our thinking about this from 2019 to present, with conditions being, very different in the world, what they are. And I see, Jessica, maybe you're waiting to jump in.
No, I was just like sighing with agreement.
Okay.
But I think it's, I really appreciate the ways in which there's sort of like deep overlap, but also diffractions and differences away how we're taking. So I think I'm just sitting with like the Venn diagramishness of the conversation. I hate to put in that visual metaphor, but I just feel like it's sort of like weaving, and I come back actually to water, to what you're saying. Yeah.
The German translation
to water.
calls it unruhig bleiben, to stay restless. It's not a very strong translation, restless. Haraway calls it staying with the troubles, which is also not very strong. I like the water metaphor because the body, the soma, is full of water, right, Celia?
Yes, and there's a fascia, like
the fascia, right? The lines, yes.
And what's beautiful in these metaphors is that none of them involve closure or solutionizing. Yeah. They keep this open. Really beautiful to have your perspectives come together.
Thank you for having us.
And just as a reminder to those who are watching this, you can find more information about the project down below in the information underneath the video, as well as links to all of the provocations. And again, thank you so much, everybody, for your time.